So thank you all for joining us. It's a beautiful day out, so we appreciate you taking the hour and spending it with us. Hope everyone's doing well. I have a special announcement, so I just wanted to let everybody that's on today know that today is International Elder Abuse Awareness Day. This is a day basically that is dedicated to talking about the prevalence of elder abuse, highlighting the different organizations that do work in the elder abuse space, and encouraging everyone to have those important conversations with our loved ones about how they can stay safe and what happens if they are being abused. Anyone in New York City that is feeling threatened can call 311 and report, and it will come to New York City Department for the Aging, and we will have somebody call you back, a trained social worker call you back. So I just want to, make sure everyone's safe out there before we start. So welcome to our second session with Pedro Salazar from Urban Upbound. For those that don't know me, my name is David Knapp. I work in the Elder Justice Unit here at DFTA, and I will be your host today. But before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that this is pre-recorded, or there will be a pre-recorded, or you will be recorded, and we will have a pre-recorded welcome from our Commissioner for the New York City Department for the Aging, Ms. Lorraine Cortez-Vasquez. Take it away, Lorraine.
I want to welcome you to the second season of Chat with the Expert. I am Lorraine Cortez-Vasquez, Commissioner of the New York City Department for the Aging. In the middle of COVID-19 pandemic, DFTA launched our exceptional Chat with the Expert pilot with an eye for providing up-to-the-minute information and advocacy around the complex issues of ongoing financial exploitation and fraud. From the beginning, we wanted to connect our audience, you, with area experts who can provide detailed knowledge, tips, advice, and additional resources. As we launch this year's lineup of topics, I hope you will continue to find them meaningful as you seek answers to questions and solutions to the problems you face or that your family may be facing. We believe knowledge properly disseminated is power. I would like to thank our partners at PSS for their continuous support of this series. I hope to see you at the next Chat with the Expert episode. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just as a reminder, again, this webinar is being recorded and will be available at the link at PSS and will be sent to you following today's presentation. You need to give it a couple of days for it to be edited and sent out. Today's presenter will not be giving any specific individual advice around scams or around financial counseling. Make sure your questions are more general in nature. Throughout today's presentation, please place any questions that you have into our live chat. They'll be answered in real time. We have staff monitoring the chat throughout, and there will be a Q&A section after Pedro finishes. For those that are here today from a DFTA agency and you'd like credit, please make sure you're using the link that was connected with your registration. We will verify everyone who has registered and is using their own individual link. I'm going to skip the info on Urban Upbound because Pedro will be talking about it, but we are again in for a great treat to have Pedro Salazar, Manager of Financial Fitness at Urban Upbound, speaking today on making sense and talking about financial counseling. I think I'm actually also introducing Wendy Rodriguez. Is that correct, Wendy? You're going to do a brief intro before intro?
So actually, Pedro and I combined our things and Pedro's going to go right into it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. All right, without further ado, here's Pedro Salazar.
Good afternoon, friends, and thanks so much for attending today's presentation. To echo what Mr. Knapp said, you could have been anywhere else in the world, but you chose to be here with us, and we appreciate that. I'm coming to you today live from beautiful Queens, New York, where my agency Urban Upbound is based and conducts free financial counseling under the auspices of the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. We're one of several agencies throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City that the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection funds and supports in providing this service to all New Yorkers. Now, when I say service and personal financial counseling, what I'm referring to is meeting with a trained and qualified financial counselor, excuse me, with a trained and qualified financial counselor in person or over the phone for a free, private, and confidential session regarding any and all aspects of personal finance. This can include credit establishment, improvement, or repair, dealing with outstanding debts, whether you are in good standing with your creditor or have fallen into default, dealing with collection agencies and collection accounts or money judgments brought against you, exploring financial instruments such as bank accounts and credit building tools so as to choose the best one for you. Uh, Also, creating a financial plan or budget to effectively manage finances. Really, we are prepared to meet with all individuals in the city of New York who are interested. We have no catchment requirements or anything like that, no income requirements. Basically, if you're interested and you can make it to us, or get us on the phone, and we have mutually available calendars, we will meet with you. Again, always free, always confidential. Um, so that brings me to today's topic, which is actually making sense and effectively creating a personal budget. It's really a big part of what we do. It's our contention and our stance that a personal budget is one of the most important things that a person can have who would consider themselves to be a financially stable and financially healthy person. So as we move on, one of the first things that we have seen a lot of in the work that we do is that folks are not always in the right mindset about their personal finances, specifically doing a budget. Not too long ago, I was actually on social media and I saw a posting, a meme that kind of made me chuckle a little bit. And it was of a person who was on their way to the bank to check their account balance, but then decided that they didn't need that kind of negativity in their lives, right? It was a little bit, I chuckled a little bit because it resonated with me, and I feel with our team because we do see quite a bit of this kind of sort of mentality. And again, no judgments here. We all have our own situations and we all have our own approaches. But after years of having done this kind of work with hundreds, if not thousands, of New Yorkers, one of the things that we've learned is that despite being one of the pillars of financial stability, budgeting is actually one of the least favorite topics to broach in financial counseling sessions. We believe that this is partly the case because some of us actually avoid delving too deeply into our own finances. As long as our numbers pan out at the end of the month, some of us don't want to know too much about how we are spending and especially misspending. When many of us hear the word budget, we think privation or lack and austerity. Even in our everyday language, the word budget has a special place in the realm of discomfort, as it's commonly used to describe constraint, such as, sorry, but I can't join you folks on that trip as I am on a budget. Um, I'm here to tell you that we don't need to look at it this way, as a budget doesn't need to be a statement of poverty or a financial straitjacket, as you can see from my nifty little picture there. Rather, we should look at it as a plan for the effective and efficient use of limited resources. When you really think about it, even countries as wealthy and well-resourced as ours need budgets and financial plans in order to allocate resources correctly, minimize and eliminate waste, and most importantly, to plan for emergencies and also for the future, right? So again, one of the first steps here is taking ownership of our own financial situations and not being put off by the detail-oriented and sometimes introspective, soul-searching nature of this work. I've heard it said quite often that a budget is a living document, but is also a moral document. And that kind of resonates with me as well, given that in terms of the moral document, it really shows, to us and to others, when we establish a budget and when we go over it, it really shows us what is important to us, right? How are we spending our money? Where are we going, with our finances? Do we have a tight control? Are we loose? Do we really account for every dollar? Or, are we the kind of person that sometimes is hoping and praying when you go up to that ATM machine that you're not going to get not enough funds or insufficient funds prompt? And again, no judgments here. It happens to the best of us. But our goal here is basically to enable folks and to help folks to really take more, not only more ownership, but also more of a positive outlook on how this sometimes onerous exercise can really help us in our lives, very much so. So moving on, one of the first things that we tell clients, especially ones that we work with, is that in order to move forward, you kind of have to know where you are now. And in order to know where you are now, you oftentimes have to know where you've been, right? This is especially applicable in the realm of finances. Um, it has been the case many times that clients come to us, with a seemingly innocuous sort of just general inquiry about their credit. I haven't seen my credit report in a few years, and I'm actually considering, putting a down payment on a house or moving to a new apartment. I want to get myself a new car. I know that having good credit is important. I'd like to check it out. And again, client doesn't expect anything crazy. They really just want to do a little reconnaissance, for their own information before they actually go take the big step. Lo and behold, when we pull the report, there are a few things on there that they had not counted on, right? Maybe they forgot about an old cell phone bill that they thought long gone. Maybe there was a utility that when they moved out of their last apartment, they thought they turned off and did not, and somehow it's caught up with them. A big part of what we do is help clients uncover gaps in their understanding of their own finances during financial counseling sessions. And in keeping with what we talked about in the previous slide, some of us think that we have a pretty good bead on what we're doing financially, despite not delving very deeply into our numbers and habits, because there have been no obvious meltdowns or emergencies, right? We've had many people tell us, we have many clients tell us during sessions or even in workshops, me personally, they told me, listen, thanks, Salazar, but I really don't need to go too much into this as my rent is paid, my lights are on, I have food in the fridge, I'm doing just fine, right? Or we can also hear, hey, listen, I'm okay with this. And we can skip this step as I pay my monthly bills. I'm not late on any credit cards. And any money I have left over is my me money. So that is my budget. That is my financial plan, right? Now, again, we obviously cannot force our clients to do anything, right? They are the bosses. We are here as as their assistants, as their helpers, right? But given our sort of expertise and our professional experience, we can honestly say that is not a budget, right? That is barely kind of an idea or a plan. Really, one of the things that we've noticed again is folks tend to gloss over a lot of the things that go into their actual personal finances. Sometimes it becomes a little bit uncomfortable to ask ourselves these questions, right? But it is of the utmost importance before we undertake any kind of true budgeting, undertaking any kind of budgeting endeavor, right? We've got to understand where we are, right? And what does that mean? As you can see from this slide here, what is your actual income? And I know a lot of folks are like, come on, that's so basic. Who doesn't know that? Believe it or not, right? There are folks who frankly are not well versed enough in how taxes work, right? That they don't really understand the difference between, their take home and what, they might see on a tax form. Also, there are folks who are living with fixed incomes and may not particularly understand how the cost of living increases come into effect, how changes in the actual plans, the actual benefits, come into effect. And also, there are folks who may receive benefits such as food stamps or other kinds of support. Um, and who consider that money to be free money and really not worth budgeting, right? I'm here to tell you that that is a very big mistake, right? It is, if it is something that can go into your coffers that you use for your own personal life, it's something that can be and should be budgeted. Another question that we ask folks a lot is, how much debt are you carrying? There are some folks who frankly just keep on paying minimum payments on their debts. For those of us who are familiar with minimum payments, I'm talking about credit cards, and basically just kind of staying still in terms of your debt and accruing interest possibly. Some folks really just kind of take debt to be a matter of fact, and really just, as long as they are staying in good standing with their creditors, right, are not really too concerned about making significant progress in terms of bringing that debt down. I can tell you this is one of the major mistakes that a lot of our clients make. And eventually something happens where they can't keep up anymore, fall into default, and are carrying a large amount of debt that might have otherwise been able to have been reduced. Do you have any amount in accessible savings or available credit? Right now, again, nowadays, savings are a tough thing to come by given the current economic climate, but we do work with quite a few people who have at least something of a nest egg, right? Something of an emergency fund should anything happen. And in cases where they do not have that, right, they do have credit cards that are available for them in an emergency to kind of get them over that hump, right? All of this stuff is very important in determining what your current financial capabilities are, because you do have to have contingency plans. Because again, if COVID taught us anything, is that there will always be an emergency, right? There is never a shortage of weird curveballs that life throws us, right? And then one of the more incisive questions: how much are you spending on a weekly, monthly basis, and on what? Again, a seemingly innocuous question, but believe you me, when we work with clients and sometimes even with ourselves, we kind of sort of writhe in our seats and are a little bit uncomfortable about what we may uncover in talking about this. Sometimes, again, no judgments, but sometimes we are avoidant, and sometimes, again, so long as there's no emergency, as long as there's no, kind of bottom falling out, we're fine. We leave it alone, well enough alone, right? Let sleeping dogs lie. Here to tell you that that is otherwise known as living paycheck to paycheck, right? That's really not a plan. We are basically we're basically assigning ourselves to forever be reactionary in terms of our finances, as opposed to proactive. And more often than not, I hate to say, when folks don't have this kind of mindset or this kind of understanding of their current financial positions, one of the first things that we notice is, glaringly missing is actually savings or an emergency fund, which again, if COVID taught us anything, right, can sometimes be the difference between life and death, quite literally. It's our position that if you need a little bit of help in terms of understanding your current financial position, either because maybe you've never dealt with this kind of with this kind of task, or at least not very incisively, it's our position that you should definitely come and see your friendly financial counselor. Again, we are pretty much everywhere in New York. So free, confidential, please come see us. We can definitely help you figure this out if you don't know it already, or at the very least, give you a second pair of eyes and a professional, educated opinion on the matter. However, moving on in terms of actually doing a budget, one of the things that a lot of us really take for granted is that you can just kind of go into a budget and do it cold, right? One of the best examples I've heard on this is there is no such thing as a marathon runner or a race runner that just wakes up one day and decides, today I'm going to do this marathon, or I'm going to run this 5K, this 10K. No way, right? You definitely have to have some preparation, some grounding, right? Something that prepares you for this big thing coming up, right? The same thing is true for budgeting, right? And failure to do so failure to do the training and the preparation work is really a recipe for coming up short and eventually maybe losing faith in the process and kind of abandoning it altogether, right? When I say preparation work, really what I'm talking about is many of us may have a very good understanding of where our money is going on a regular basis because we are familiar with our fixed expenses, right? Everybody knows how much you're paying for mortgage or rent. Everybody usually knows how much their cell phone or their utilities are. These things are, well, utilities can change, you know what I mean? They actually do, but hopefully not too radically. But again, the fixed expenses are usually pretty easy to determine, pretty easy to kind of plan for. However, it is the variable expenses, you know, the things that so many of us might deem wants as opposed to needs, or might deem emergencies, right? It's these things that often kind of elude us, and really they're things that we take for granted and sort of just gloss over and mixed into one big pot, right? I can tell you many years ago when I first sat with a financial counselor, just like myself, ironically, I didn't know I would be doing this for a living, but I remember sitting with this person and, you know, they were very affable, they were very nice, but I was very guarded. We went through the exercise where they asked me all my questions regarding my monthly expenses, my figures, right? And I, you know, kind of thought I knew what I was doing, but at the same time, I realized that a lot of my answers were guesstimates. A lot of my answers were kind of projections and sort of riffs that I kind of, you know, came up with. And in some cases, I'm not going to lie to you, I was also kind of elusive. I was lying. You know, in one particular instance, I didn't want to be embarrassed, and they asked me, "Hey, how much money are you spending eating out?" You know, and I didn't want to seem like a complete sort of, you know, just spendthrift. So I gave a very, very conservative figure. I was like, yeah, I'm only spending $75 going out, right? And when I actually really did the analysis, months later, I turned out I was spending more like 3 or 4 times that. So of course, the budget that they gave me, the budget that we drew up together, was useless because the numbers I gave them were useless. You know, again, no judgment. I've been there myself, and like I said, I no shame in my game at this point. I was kind of avoidant. I was lying. I didn't really want to know, right? But in order to avoid this and in order to truly prepare for any kind of budgeting effort, the first thing we've got to do, no way around it, we've got to track our expenses, right? This can be an onerous process. I can tell you that at this point, I go back long enough that I remember when there were no computers or no, you know, actually computers in our pockets, aka cell phones, right? That, you know, could do the work for us. There were no apps. There was nothing like that. I went old school and I went pen and paper, which is our first actual option here in terms of, you know, tracking expenses, the ledger method. I had myself a little notebook, you know, a little, what was it, like 4 by something, you know, with the little spirals that I carried everywhere with me, you know, at the behest of one of my financial counselors at the time. And everywhere I went, I wrote down every single thing I spent. And believe you me, initially this was really annoying, right? I ended up, you know, getting stares at the supermarket sometimes or on the street even, where people thought I don't know, I might have been a police officer, or I was, you know, being nosy, or, you know, just up to something not great. But I stuck with it. My counselor suggested that I do it for at least a couple of weeks. I did it that first time. I did do it a couple of weeks, but in subsequent iterations, I think my record was a month and a half, right, of just tracking my expenses on a daily basis. And when I say tracking, I mean exactly that. I mean $1.25 bagel, you know, 75 cents coffee. Remember when coffee cost 75 cents? Um, just all these things, you know, I would write down, you know, every day. And at the end of the week, I would basically synthesize, I do my math, and I would, you know, chart out what I had done, right? Again, the ledger method is a really good way to go, right? However, nowadays, you know, with the help of modern technology and science, we've now got phone-based apps and spreadsheets and software. If you are so inclined and you've got these skills, or you can, obtain these skills, this can make your life a lot easier, just because you don't have to walk around writing anything, or, looking like a little bit of a weirdo, right? Standing in a corner at the fruit section of the supermarket writing stuff down. And basically it can make the transition from your tracking tool into your budget tool a lot more seamless and easy, right? There are also some folks who use the transaction record method, right? Which I personally don't like that much. But people are apt to collect all their receipts, all their bank statements, just kind of put them in a box every day. And at the end of month, do the same thing, just kind of, like the little cartoon gentleman here on the slide, sit down and crunch all their numbers, right? And get to, the bottom of their situation that way. Now, whatever method you choose to use should be one that you are most comfortable with and can realistically stick with over time. And please understand that the method need not be permanent. Now, as we grow, we can change, we can enhance, or we can stay with what we know, right? However, be advised that not only is this exercise effective in terms of getting foundational numbers for our budgets, but it can also be enlightening in terms of our habits, our patterns, and in some cases, our financial mistakes. I can tell you personally, when I, went for the record and I did my month and a half, I began to see things that I really was not happy about. I think I was single-handedly keeping Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts in business. My gum budget was ridiculous. I couldn't believe I was spending as much money as I was on gum, because I was no longer buying the 25-cent gums. I was buying now the dollar Orbit gums. And who knew I could chew that much? Also, one of the things that was most enlightening is the people that I hung out with, right? Because my tracking was so good and I was so detailed, I ended up realizing that whenever I hung out with a certain, crew of people, I had really good nights. They were very easy on the wallet. Everybody, kind of did their share, right? We all helped each other out. Nobody had to carry too much of a load, right? Then I had other friends, or, in some cases, friend, where every time we hung out, it was a very expensive night for me. It was, a couple of $100 easy, and at the end of the week, or when, it came time for me to, do my numbers, when it came time for me to actually take a look at stuff, I realized I can't believe this happened. And it happened a couple of times, right? It wasn't long before, the obvious happened, and I just stopped hanging out with those persons. I mean, I like to think it was nothing personal, but frankly, I just couldn't spend the amount of money that I was spending anymore. But again, the point being that this kind of exercise, this kind of tracking, can help us to uncover a lot of things about ourselves that we may have known at some level, but weren't really harping on, or weren't really taking too much into consideration. I can also tell you that eventually, when I got my when I finally got my tracking under control, and when I finally got it really down, I also started to understand sweet spots. Well, what I call sweet spots, which basically are ranges of what I should be spending on any particular thing. The best example I can give you is, I realized that no matter how austere I wanted to be in terms of food, there was never going to be a month where I spent less than $250, right? Every month, at least, I was spending at least that much on groceries, right? For my home, for my family, for me. And by contrast, I knew that if I was going over 275, 280, I was having a very expensive month, right? Anything, that was my threshold. And in some cases, that is really the best we can hope for, just because, our finances can change daily, weekly. Sometimes we've got to roll with those punches. But if we've got a nice sweet spot, a nice understanding of what range we should be sticking to, that can be very, very useful in terms of managing our finances. So yeah, once we do the preparation work, once we've got our numbers, once we really kind of understand where we are, now we can go into actually doing a budget. Which brings us to our next slide: create an actual budget. And as you can see, I've underlined and emphasized actual, right? Now, the reason I'm doing that, is because as you can see from the gentleman here on the slide, right, pointing up to his head, many folks that we've worked with, both in session and workshop, when we talk about a budget and, what budgeting method they use, they're very, quick to say, hey, listen, I know all my numbers, right? I got everything up here. This is what I pay in rent. This is what I pay in phone bill. This is what I give my kids, right? So on and so forth. I'm really good with this. I've got great recall. It's all up here, right? I'm here to tell you, my friends, no disrespect to anybody. And again, no judgments, but that is not an effective budgeting method, right? Time is nobody's friend, right? And our memories are not today what they used to be 2 years ago, even 10 years ago. I mean, quite frankly, sometimes I have a hard time remembering what I did last week, right? And during the pandemic, when we were kind of locked down and all those days seemed to mix together, believe me, it got really hazy, really cloudy, really fast, right? So any kind of budgeting tool that we choose to use, right, really has to be, it's got to be some form of document or tangible tool. It's got to be something that we can touch, we can see, something that we can definitely always make a reference to. I had one client who on a weekly basis would print out his budget and put it on his fridge. So it was ubiquitous. It was something that was constantly, reminding him. We've also had some clients who, are a little bit more tech savvy, right? Who actually get reminders and sort of updates and kind of warnings. Hey, you're about to, spend a little bit too much, or you're kind of, $10 away from your maximum, right? All of these things are tremendously useful. And again, the type of tool that you use really depends on your style and what works for you, right? Only we can determine this. We individually, I should say, can determine this. However, whatever it is you use, please make sure it is something that you can refer to consistently, something that you can see, right? Again, the mental method does not work, right? It's something that must also be easily accessible and simple, right? One of the things that we've seen, with clients who, have the best of intentions and who really want to get underway, they make an investment and they buy some very complicated accounting software, that they quite frankly don't understand, or cannot maximize. And these things are not cheap, by the way, so what ends up happening is they kind of try and muddle their way through it, right? They use it sort of at half capacity. Things don't really work out the way they thought they would, or it's not as easy to do. So they just kind of let it fall by the wayside. They get disillusioned by the process, right? When in reality, it was just the wrong tool that they were using, right? We've also had some folks who, again, stay old school, keep paper and, pen and paper as their budget, not too far off from, what we used to do back in my day, balancing our checkbooks, a lost art, by the way. It's not uncommon to see that too, but some folks unfortunately don't really have the presence of mind or discipline to continually use that. And what they might do is sort of use it for a couple of days, or do that first inaugural budget and then put it in a drawer somewhere, right? And then on top of that drawer, you see more papers, some more bills, some more invoices. Before you know it, it's gone. Nobody knows where it is. And again, not useful. The person becomes disillusioned with the process. The person becomes, basically just abandons the whole endeavor altogether, right? So again, it should be something that you can constantly easily get and easily understand. Again, along with being a tangible tool, this is something that must be editable, and customizable, right? It does us no good if you do an amazing, stellar first budget, print it up, put it on your fridge, and then never update it again. All right, that was a good start out of the gate, but frankly, as we said before, budgets are not only moral documents but living documents, which means they can change and usually will. As a matter of fact, I'm here to tell you that if your budget isn't changing and if you aren't making adjustments, chances are you're not doing the budget correctly. So please do remember, editable and customizable. And along the same lines, something that must be constantly and consistently updated, right? Everybody knows our finances can change in a flash, sometimes daily. I can tell you from my end, with my family, I have a big family and we're all pretty close. Sometimes house guests come to stay with me, and I welcome them. I love them. Of course, I'm happy to be there, but I'm happy that they're there and I'm happy to be there for them. But I have to also make plans. I have to understand that if I'm having house guests, my food bill is going to be a little bit higher this month, right? I have to understand that if it's summertime and they're staying with me, we're going to be running some ACs and fans more often than not, right? And it's going to have an effect on my on my light bill, right? These are the things that can change. And also, of course, we've always got emergencies. Not too long ago, I was walking down this, well, actually more than a few years ago now, I was walking down the street in an old pair of shoes. I was running and I was running for the bus and I accidentally caught it on the curb. The entire sole of my shoe fell off. So here I was on the way to work in the rain and I've got one shoe. I'm going barefoot. So what did I have to do? I had to emergency pop into a shoe store, get myself a pair of, decent shoes, but it kind of blew my budget because the shoes that I wanted, were I didn't properly plan for that. I didn't make any kind of contingency plan. I didn't have that in my budget, right? So again, the object lesson there is that we've got to be able to update stuff consistently and constantly because our situations are always changing. And again, if they're not, probably not tracking correctly, they're probably not doing the budget correctly. I'd like to model for you guys one of the first budgets or the budget templates that the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection actually provided for us, the providers. This is a very, very simple Excel tool. I think this has been in circulation now, I think for the better part of probably a decade, if not more. It's a simple Excel sheet. And the reason I love it and the reason I still make reference, to it is because it is so very easy to use. It covers all the bases. It does all the math for you. All you've really got to do is put your figures in. Now, the thing about it is that seems like a really easy task, but it actually it isn't. There are other tools on the market, both free and paid for, that will go into a lot more detail, a lot more depth, more bells and whistles, this kind of thing. But at the end of the day, they all basically should be doing the same thing for you, which is crunching the numbers or doing the math for you, right? So all you really do is kind of make sure that you're putting in the right figures. This one in particular, I like, again, the headings and the actual spending and income categories are very easy, very clear. In some cases, maybe a little bit too easy, right? And this is something that happens a lot with budgeting tools if we're not careful. Some of these questions require a little more than just a quick and cursory review, right? Some of these we really have to think about, right? I mentioned to you folks, how I initially lied to my my original financial counselor about how much I was spending eating out. Well, part of the reason that I did that, not just because I was, bashful and shy and didn't want to, seem like a spendthrift, but also, quite frankly, I was making a mistake too. It was actually human error. I remember thinking back, and when I was asked this question, I remember really trying to kind of scour my memory for how many times I sat in a diner, how many times I went to a restaurant, how many times I, went to a coffee shop, how many times I sat down eating out, right? But what I didn't consider is how many times I came home, tired and late on a Friday and I didn't want to cook. So I ended up ordering takeout Chinese food to be delivered at my house. Or how many times, on my way to work, I realized I didn't bring my breakfast. So I stopped at a place and got myself, a bacon, egg, and cheese and a coffee or hot chocolate or something like that. the point being that when it comes to these categories and when it comes to putting down these figures, right, we definitely, need to use the information that we get from tracking our expenses, but we also have to make sure that we are taking into consideration that some of these categories are multi-pronged and that they definitely require a little bit more thinking and a little bit more sort of, delving deep into the details. Another example I can give you is a lot of folks that we work with tell us, I do buy laundry detergent and I do buy dish fluid. I buy all these things, but I really buy it, at Costco when I buy the rest of my groceries for the month or, for every 2 months or so on and so forth. One of the things that we're not considering though in that type of answer is that a toothpaste bottle or shampoo, right, doesn't usually finish in a month. It's not like milk that we have to, constantly buy like almost every couple of days or every week, depending on how much you like milk. Usually things like laundry detergent may last us more than a month. Sometimes, if we buy the big toilet paper or the big paper towel packs, right, these things do not get exhausted right away. So it might not be an expense that we are actually doing every month or every week. It may be something we're doing quarterly, right? Again, it's all in the details. That exactitude is something that tracking expenses and doing a budget like this will really, kind of help us and will really sort of help us figure out. I can tell you again from personal experience, in calculating what I was doing eating out, I wasn't taking it into consideration, take out my snacks, my afternoon treat number two. I wasn't taking these things into consideration until I finally really sat down, really started tracking, really, got to the nitty gritty of it and, got it into my budget and actually was able to make very good projections for what my sweet spot should be. If and when anybody meets with a financial counselor for the Department of Consumer Worker Protection, I promise you that any counselor you meet with will use either a budget like this, a variation of it, or or some tool that is more to your liking to help you basically get this under control, or refine it if you already are versed in it. So that being said, in terms of actually seeing a financial counselor, which is really something that we hope everybody will take advantage of. Again, this is a free confidential service. If you go anywhere on the private, in the private sector, private market, a service like this can cost you anywhere from a couple of hundred to a couple of $1,000s, and you may not always get the results you wanted. Right. I'm not trying to cast aspersions on any of these services. Some of them are very good and very legit, but it's not always a one size fit all. And some of these agencies sometimes will not take your stuff, your specific stuff into consideration. To this end, I suggest seeing a financial counselor of our stripe, which will cost you nothing, right? And at the very least, the very most it'll cost you is some of your time, and you will definitely walk out knowing a little bit more about the situation or whatever your need may be. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but there is no limit to the amount of sessions that a person can sign up for, so long as there's a need and so long as there are mutual availability, right? We can always meet with someone. Now, in terms of actually scheduling, you can contact if you're in Queens, or even if you're not in Queens, and you want to meet with me or with one of my colleagues here at Urban Upbound. This is my information. I am Pedro Salazar. This is my phone number and my email. I'm sure if you are not taking a screenshot of it or writing it down right now, we can get it to you afterwards. Mr. Knapp is very diligent and good about that kind of thing. However, if you are outside of Queens or maybe want to meet with another provider, you can take the initiative and call 311. Really, all you would have to do is ask for free financial counseling, and you will be routed to what I believe is a call center. And they're very nice there and very helpful, and they can help you figure out, based on your zip code or where you are, what the best center for you is in terms of proximity and availability. Now, if you're a little bit more technologically inclined, you can actually go online to this particular link here, the Talk Money Book Appointment. Basically, what this does is give you access online to a system that will allow you to actually put in your own information in terms of zip code, in terms of your need, in terms of the program you want, and it will give you a list of available providers based on your geographical location. This is what the page actually looks like at first. As you can see, pretty user-friendly. There are multiple languages available. Urban Upbound in particular can serve clients in English, Russian, Uzbek, and I believe now we can even do Chinese. Oh, also Spanish. But yes, as you can see here from the first page, very simple, very easy to do. And if we go to the next slide, you can even see here, it'll give you a map. It'll give us a map of the available providers and their locations, their names, the name of the providers. And unfortunately, it got cut off on my screenshot. But if you go a little bit lower, you can even see the names of the counselors available and the providers that they are with. Again, I cannot stress enough, this is a free, confidential, private service. I would recommend anybody and everybody to take advantage of this because it's here, it's for you, and it can only help you. Well, we've come to the end of my presentation. My name is Pedro Salazar. If anybody has any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Pedro. That you really got into some of the details that I was hoping that you would. I just want to make a big push again for the Office of Financial Empowerment and the services that Pedro's talking about. Many of the bill payer clients in our unit have taken advantage of the service. And now I'd like to introduce Barry Langer, who's been looking at questions as they've been coming in and posing his own questions. And we will kick off our next segment, which is the Q&A for this session. So take it away, Barry.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Pedro. Great talk. And a lot of comments going in about how great the presentation was today. So we have some questions. First one is, what's your thoughts on mint.com as one of the alternative for budgeting?
Yeah,
or do you have any other recommendations? Any, top three that you like?
In my opinion, I've used Mint before. I don't use it anymore. I really do like it. It's pretty user friendly. If I'm not mistaken, it's not free. It was free initially. I don't think it's free anymore. I really enjoy that kind of app, that kind of service. The only thing that I kind of wasn't that crazy about is that I had to put in some of my kind of banking information, my debit card information, in order for the service to actually work, efficiently and effectively. And given the data breaches and such that we've had of late, so much of that, I've always been a little bit wary of that. But I do think that it's very good. They're definitely something, and they're not the only one, obviously. But yeah, I do recommend using that just because it does make stuff a lot easier. It's much more seamless, gives you graphs, readouts. My paper and pen method was great, but it did have limitations.
Very, very good. If somebody's interested in booking with you, I'll make a two-part question. Number one, where in their life should they be, when they should consider getting a budgeting? Any key factors that would make them want to sign up with you? And number two, what kind of prep should they have? What should they come prepared with for their first session?
So we really don't discriminate in terms of knowledge base. It's not like, we don't have any prereqs or anything like that. You have to know this before you come to us. No, we're ready, willing, and able to meet persons, folks where they are. If you've got very limited knowledge, of this, but you're interested and curious, we can help you. Or if you are more of a seasoned person who's already kind of been doing this, and maybe you just want some, extra set of eyes, some tips, a different perspective, we're definitely here for that. To answer the question directly, there really is no stage required that you should be at to come see us. Really all it takes is just the willingness to to speak with us.
Excellent.
So
So they
Barry,
don't have to come with their bills, or their records. They can just start with an introductory session that you can walk them through.
Sure. I mean, we do, I should walk that back. We do usually ask clients to come in with any kind of financial information that they feel might inform us as to their present situation, right? Some folks will come in with their credit card statements. Some folks will come in with like some invoices from past debts, collection notices, past credit reports, right? All of that stuff would be helpful, definitely, but not 100% necessary. One of the main things that we do when we work with folks is actually pull their credit reports, which can very much so give us a very quick snapshot of where they are in terms of their debts and other financial things.
David, did you have a question or a comment?
just had a question. We regularly hear that people say, oh, I asked my neighbor or my friend and they told me I should do bankruptcy, and why should I go to a financial counselor? Can you talk for a second about the training and the expertise of the people that are financial counselors, so that people will have a better understanding of how why they should come to you, and what are you going to be able to see that maybe they wouldn't normally get from their neighbor or friend or family member?
Sure, most certainly. So first off, bankruptcy, big step. And I think a lot of folks are very quick and apt to say, I'm going to do that. My cousin did it. It worked out well for them. Why shouldn't I? Right? Not like we mentioned before, it's not always one size fit all. And again, not trying to throw anybody under the bus, not trying to cast any aspersions. At the end of the day, everybody's trying to make a living. One of the things that I find in terms of bankruptcy and in terms of the marketing of bankruptcy services is that a lot of folks tend to receive the message that, once you decide to take that step and you get an attorney, that it's a done deal and you're good to go and it's going to happen. That is not the case. Bankruptcy is an application, and like any application can be denied, right? And frankly, if you do retain an attorney for this service, which is advisable, especially if you're going for one of the more complicated bankruptcy types, it is possible that it can get denied, and your attorney, right, will still keep the money. You don't get that money back. They get to keep it for their service, for their work. And you just may have to apply again after a certain period of time. I guess in terms of how we're trained and what we can help to do, first off, let me say, we are not attorneys, right? So we are not in a position to give actual legal advice. We are not in a position to fill out bankruptcy sort of forms, right? We can advise on the matter, and we do work with attorneys that can actually help in that regard. Specifically, I'm speaking of the New York Legal Assistance Group, NILAG. They're a very good resource that the city, the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, provides to financial counselors for cases that are more advanced, such as a bankruptcy. But I will say, what the financial counselor can actually do for you is actually, number one, assess your situation and really try and determine whether bankruptcy is something you need to do, right? There have actually been quite a few cases, in the past where we worked with clients who had destroyed credit and who had a large amount of debt, who were ready to go to bankruptcy, but once they met with us, realized that many of these debts were either already past statute of limitations, which means you cannot get sued on the debt, and also some of them were negligible amounts that were very close to statute of limitations, such that if the client waited it out, right, it would have just, it would have gone away, within the next 2 years. And when I say go away, I mean, not only can you not be sued, but it will actually disappear off of the credit report too, regardless of whether you paid or not. Now, again, not trying to speak badly of anybody, but any attorney who's trying to make money probably won't inform you of that, right? They'll say, oh yeah, you know what, you want this bankruptcy, I can do this for you, this is what's going to happen, so on and so forth, right? Again, they're just businessmen, they're just business people trying to make, trying to make some coin, right? Our job is to assess the client, right? Make sure that this is the appropriate step for them, right? And in some cases, it very much so is, right? If that is the case, part of what we will do is explain the very broad strokes of what a bankruptcy includes, right? Some of the things that folks are not very well aware of is that there are educational components to actually filing a bankruptcy, right? You've got to do some online courses specifically too, right? And earn some certificates that will actually allow you to proceed with the, in the proceeding and actually potentially get your debt discharged. These sometimes come with fees, right? And your attorney may actually charge you on top of, his own sort of fees, may charge you for that as well. There are instances in which, a attorney may ask you to pull your own credit report, or if not, they will charge you for it to pull it. That's something that we can help clients avoid. Also, we can walk them through what they can expect, both before, during, and after, right? Just a quick example, many clients are under the impression that once you file bankruptcy, you can never have credit again, or you can't have it again for 10 years. Not the case, not the case. It has definitely been our experience that clients fresh off of bankruptcy are getting all types of credit card solicitations. Basically, hey, come and apply with us. Why? Because they know, they've got access to public records, right? They know that you like spending money and, maybe have a little bit of a, control issue, right? And because you filed bankruptcy once before, you're not going to be able to do it again, right? For at least 7 to 10 years. I believe it's 10, actually. No, 7. And this time around, if you default, they're going to get their pound of flesh one way or another, right? But again, to answer your question directly, after all that, part of our job in terms of bankruptcy is just really making sure that the client doesn't put down money or get into a contract or situation that they could have either handled themselves, handled with us, or or avoided altogether.
Okay. Do we have time for one more? I mean, I can ask a question, or we're right at the hour. David. I'll ask one more, and with understanding we just have a couple of minutes left. In your doing a budgeting with clients, are there any general areas that you could say are surprises for clients? They didn't realize, wow, I'm spending, places where people would not think to look for where they may having a budgeting issue, spending issue.
Yeah. I mean, the real sort of common ones that come up again and again are things like recreation, eating out, and most recently the use of online services or apps. It's actually I got to tell you, I'm actually guilty of this myself. I will sometimes sign up for things on a lark. I'm an avid comic book reader. And once this stuff went online and I had access to their archives, I went crazy, right? So I bought a couple of, subscriptions. And I think the last time I read one was 2 years ago, maybe, you know what I mean? And I think I'd been paying that for who knows how many months because I forgot about it, right? And this happens to us quite a bit. Folks sometimes will, just kind of get scared because they look at their credit card their bank statement, and they realize that they're getting this direct debit every month that they don't recall, they don't understand what it is, right? It's not until they actually investigate it, they realize, oh, this is that service that I had been paying for, that gym membership that I had been paying for, that was getting automatically debited from me, and I just forgot about. Also, in terms, again, of eating out, in terms of, recreation, some folks, some of us, I should say, really are we're not very thorough, and we're not very incisive about the questions we ask ourselves about what recreation actually means, right? For some of us, it's just, oh, you know what? How many times did I go out with my friends, right? 2, 3 times, right? But what we're not taking into consideration is how many times did they come over to our house and we had to provide, food, drink? How many times did we treat somebody? How many times did we treat ourselves, right? It's usually those kind of little detailed things that we sort of gloss over and don't take into consideration because we're focusing so much more on the fixed expenses and the things that are obvious and in our face.
Well, thank you, David. I think we're at the hour.
Yeah, so thank you. I wanted to do a big thank you to Pedro, and I wanted to also do a thank you to PSS Life University and to Kevin Boyette, who is an amazing partner for us. He does all of the hosting of these live webinars. And I wanted to call attention to, in terms of upcoming events, we have a 2-part upcoming event, Medicare Part A and B and Medicare Part C and D, the 20th of July, August 2nd. That's with Valerie Bogart and NILAG. She's going to walk everybody through all of the changes. And then Wednesday, August 17th, we'll have another session on Social Security disability benefits for adults. That's also through NILAG. So you can register. The link is in in the chat. We will be sending everybody a link to view this video and all the previous videos, along with the resource guide that Pedro and the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection are putting together. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of the week. Bye, everybody.